here because the outside world rejects you.
The Ninja Turtles IDW comics that started in 2011 recently ended their run at issue 150. This was a big deal. These comics have been going on month in and month out for over a decade, and some have called it the best version of the Turtles that have ever come out. And honestly, it's up there. It's a good, cohesive run of comics that from its very first issue, they just kept evolving and adding to their continuity, and it's never stopped. It's a straight line from issue 1 to issue 150. Were there patches where things slowed down here and there? Sure, but the consistency to keep this universe going is a feat in itself, and I appreciate the fact that it's a solid, mature story that they just kept building on top of. They should honestly adapt it into a mature animated series at some point. It's a no-brainer. They'll literally have like 10 plus seasons mapped out for them if they stick to the story that's laid out in the comics. But with that said, as we mentioned, this run recently came to an end. Issue 150 was the last issue of the title. Now, how did it end? Well, that's what we're here to discuss today. But where do we jump in? Well, recently we did a video that broke down the entire event of Ninja Turtles: The Armageddon Game. This was a big Ninja Turtle story in these IDW comics that took place right before the last 10 issues that led up to the finale, issue 150. So real quick, first of all, I would recommend pausing this video if you haven't seen that Armageddon Game breakdown and go watch it, and then come back and check out how the last 10 issues here that we're about to talk about ended the run. Now, speaking of the Armageddon Game, if you have checked out that video breakdown already, then you know by the end of the Armageddon Game, there were a few loose ends that didn't get wrapped up. There's Dr. Barlow, who played his part in the Armageddon Game story, but towards the end, just kind of went away. We never really saw what happened to him. Then there's also the part of Donatello having time traveled in the Armageddon Game, where he finds out that a giant shark named Armagon will eventually cause the demise of the Turtles at some point in the future. This was also never resolved in the Armageddon Game, but rest assured, they tackle this here in the finale. It's actually one of the major story points that wraps this all up. Now, real quick, before we get started, I just want to mention that there is a special announcement here at the end of the video. You're not going to want to miss it. Exciting stuff ahead. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at how the IDW Ninja Turtles comics ended their initial 150 issue run. Okay, so the events we're going to speak of are what happens from issue 140 to the last issue, issue 150. And it's kind of broken up into like two chunks. First up, it wraps up a lot of the Dr. Barlow stuff. And the second half is where we wrap up the Donatello, time travel, Armagon stuff. So yeah, just a heads up of the overall landscape here before we get started. But let's pick up where the Armageddon Game left off. After the wall was blown up in Mutant Town, and Sally, the mayor of Mutant Town, got Baxter Stockman to go on a tour across the country talking about how mutant and human relations were in a good place now, Mutant Town became a new official borough of New York. The Turtles can now walk about in public, people and mutants live amongst each other. On the surface, everything seems like it's going good, until you take a closer look. You see some newspapers are discussing how mutants are being found dead. It appears someone has it out for the mutants, and you get hints that it could be Leatherhead, who we haven't seen since the beginning of the Armageddon Game when Krang was extracted from his abdomen. One thing that you notice here is that Leonardo is having a tough time adapting to just being regular citizens and a part of society. Now they just have to let the police do the policing, and it's not them anymore. So yeah, he's struggling with this a bit, while his brothers are all kind of distracted doing their own thing now. Another thing we see here, now that the Armageddon Game is over, is that Alopex has pretty much like taken custody of the Weasels, and they're pretty much like their own crew, their own clan, and they don't talk to the Turtles anymore. And this is all because during the Armageddon Game, Alopex didn't like that the Turtles were working with the Shredder. So yeah, Alopex tells the Weasels not to trust the Turtles anymore. Now it is around this time that we see Leonardo meets the character of Bob, this mandrill mutant here, who at the time was about to get jumped, but Leo ended up saving him. Now for those who don't know, a while back in the comics, a future version of the character of Lita, the pink turtle, came back and told Leonardo that eventually Leonardo would have students, and Bob is one of these students. Leo knows this, so he tells Bob about his dojo, and if Bob would be interested in honing in his fighting skills. At first, Bob is kind of resistant, as he used to be a human, and he really doesn't want anything to do with mutants. He actually just wants to turn back into a human, but Leonardo persuades him, but we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later on. Some time passes, and we see that the Turtles are all now back at the lair, and one evening they get into a heated discussion about how they should adjust to the new norms time here in New York City and Mutant Town, and what they should do now. Now, the only one not in this argument is Donatello. He's off in his lab, more concerned about what's coming in the future with the Armagon stuff. The argument gets so bad between Leonardo and Raphael that Raphael storms out and goes for a walk. During his walk, Raphael hears a voice. The voice says, "Raphael, leave now or die." Raphael tries to see where the voice is coming from, and eventually this leads him to a mutant dead body in an alley. Raphael stands over the dead body and leans over to check it out, but just as he does this, the police arrive and end up arresting Raphael. Now you find out that Detective Lewis, who was an ally of the Turtles during the Armageddon game, ends up standing up for Raphael at the police station. You see that she's now the chief of police. So because of this, Raphael is able to put up bail and get out. It's actually Jennica who comes by to pick him up, and on their walk home, Raphael tells Jennica about the creepy voice he heard just before he found the body. The two agree to go back to the crime scene to see if they can find something. Now meanwhile, back at the lair, Leo is trying to introduce Bob to Donatello, but Donatello just ignores them and doesn't open up his door. He's in his lab with Mona Lisa, and they have future Donatello's journal from when Donatello time traveled in the Armageddon game. They're trying to make sense of the equations and notes from the journal to see if they can maybe help prevent what's coming. Also around this time, we see Michelangelo comes home, and he does meet Bob, and while he's meeting him, he gets a call from Siri, and Siri invites him to go on tour with her, at least for a couple of weeks. Mikey plays around with the idea, and it does sound like he's gonna go. Now back with Jennica and Raphael, they've now arrived back at the scene of the crime, and they see a blood trail that leads them to a loading dock. You can see that it's a loading dock for like a meat factory. When Jennica and Raphael enter the meat factory, they find the weasels, and they're just eating some meat and a bunch of stuff from like vending machines. Raphael and Jennica go to approach them, but the weasels begin attacking since Alopex told them not to trust the turtles anymore. Raphael and Jennica try to dodge their blows, where eventually Jennica is backed up into a corner, where behind her two red eyes begin to glow. It's Leatherhead. He's there as well, and he launches Jennica across the room. You can see that something's up with Leatherhead, as his eyes are glowing red, as well as his torso. Raphael goes to help Jennica, and he tells the weasels to get out of there, but Leatherhead grabs one of them, the one named Mushroom, and runs away with her. Jennica and Raphael head back to the lair to tell the rest of the turtles about what just happened. On their way home, they run into Leonardo and Michelangelo, who were training Bob and Leonardo's other student, Carmen. We jump back over to Leatherhead, who we see is taking the weasel Mushroom into the sewers, and here we see who he's taking her to. We also see that this person is controlling Leatherhead, and that's Dr. Barlow. So yeah, it seems that after the operation during the Armageddon game, where they removed Krang from Leatherhead's abdomen, that Dr. Barlow took Leatherhead and found a way to control him using the dragon scale that he had acquired, which we also saw earlier in the story that he used to create Venus. So yeah, because of this, Venus senses what's going on and knows Dr. Barlow is back. A short while after, we see that Alopex gets mad at Raphael for not preventing one of the weasels from getting kidnapped. They argue for a little bit, but then Alopex says that her own clan will handle it. Angel, who's also there, isn't liking the way Alopex is being, but Alopex isn't hearing it. The turtles go back to the lair, and here Leonardo tries to get Donatello to stop figuring out the future stuff, that Donatello needs to help to find the weasel that was kidnapped. Things get heated here, and it leads to a scuffle. Raph breaks it up and says that if Donatello doesn't want to help, then so be it. Donatello says he is helping and pushes Raphael, and Donatello, Leonardo, and Raphael all get into like a three-way brawl. During the brawl, Michelangelo, April, and little Lita walk in, and they're scared about what's going on. They leave, and April tells Leonardo that they aren't in shape to save anyone. After the scuffle, Raphael and Jennica go off on their own to find the weasel, and Leonardo stays back with Donatello. He tells him that he needs to tell them whatever it is that he's hiding. Donatello obviously doesn't want to mess up anything with the timeline, so he's been keeping a lot of information from them. But after all this that just happened, it does look like he's gonna let Leonardo in on what's going on. We jump back over to Dr. Barlow, and we see what he's doing with the dragon scale. You can see how we saw earlier that he's using it to control Leatherhead, but you can also see that he surgically attached a piece of it to his own hand as well, and plans on also attaching a piece of the dragon scale to the weasel Mushroom. You can see that he also has these other minions here that he likely controls the same way. Barlow says that he grafted the part of the last dragon scale to Leatherhead's belly to save him after the operation to remove Krang, that the scale has incredible regenerative properties, and that it could also also awaken psychic abilities that can be manipulated. He also hints that it has the ability to reverse mutation, which seems to be his end goal so he can turn back to a regular human. Now during this, Alopex uses her sense of smell, since she's a fox, to find the weasel that got kidnapped. You see she makes it down to the sewers, but Dr. Barlow's minions, which he calls his night terrors, tell him that someone is coming. So Barlow sends out one of his mutants, which is Groundchuck and Dirtbag combined into one mutant. You can see he has two heads and stuff. Alopex and the remaining weasels begin to attack Groundchuck and Dirtbag, but they don't do so well. Alopex gets her face smashed into the concrete, the weasels get thrown across the sewer, and eventually one lands in Leatherhead's mouth, who was just arriving on the scene. You can hear Dr. Barlow's voice in Leatherhead's head saying, "Leatherhead, kill her, swallow her whole." But Leatherhead tries to fight it. He seems to still have a little bit of compassion left within him, and he starts choking out Groundchuck and Dirtbag. He yells at Alopex and the weasels to run, and so Alopex and the weasels retreat. Meanwhile, back with Michelangelo, you can see that he's using his radio show that he has now to try to get clues on who the killer is that's killing all the mutants. He does get people that call into the show and does get quite a bit of tips, which he ends up taking back to the lair to show the rest of the turtles. Now, before Michelangelo actually gets to the lair, you can see that Leonardo, Carmen, and Bob seem to be coming back home from a night of training. Carmen asks Leonardo where everyone else is. Leo says it's complicated with his family right now, and Bob tells him that that's how it goes sometimes. We cut over to Donatello, and he appears to be tapping into some of the mystic powers that he learned during the Armageddon game, and it looks like he's communicating with Venus telepathically. He tells her my brother Leo doesn't understand, talking about the future stuff that's coming with Armageddon. Venus tells Donatello that yes, Armageddon is eventually coming, but that right now his friends need him. Next we cut over to Don opening the door to the lair as Leonardo and his students arrive home. Donatello tells Leonardo that he's ready and that he called in a friend, and we see a portal open up behind Donatello, and out comes Venus, Koya, and Bludgeon. Donatello tells Leonardo, "Leo, meet Venus." So yeah, this is the first time the two have ever met. Up until this point, Donatello has been the only one that has communicated with Venus. So yeah, the two meet, and then Michelangelo and April come home as well. So yeah, now we have this big group of Leonardo, Donatello, Michelangelo, Venus, April, Koya, Bludgeon, Bob, Carmen, and they're all at the lair, and Michelangelo is showing them some of the leads that he got from the people that called into the show. A lot of the leads seem to pinpoint a place where a lot of people have seen sightings of a big glowing alligator, so Leatherhead, and the sightings all take place near a storm drain, so down in the sewers. They start to decide who's gonna go and who's gonna stay. They figure that Leonardo's new students are too new, so they'll stay back, and Jenica got hurt earlier during the attack by Leatherhead, so she'll stay back with them as well. Then the rest of the group get ready and head off to go find Dr. Barlow and save the weasel. Next we cut on over back to Alopex's place, and you could see that she got injured pretty bad when she went down to the sewers by herself to try to save the weasel mushroom. Alopex asks Raphael if he's going to join the others, but he tells her no, that she's his priority now, that they've got it covered. So yeah, for those who don't know, Raphael and Alopex were in a relationship earlier in the story, which kind of fell apart during the Armageddon game when the turtles teamed up with the Shredder. So yeah, things were kind of rough between them, but here we see that things may be healing. We cut over to the sewers and we see that our heroes are arriving. They end up splitting up into 3 teams. Leonardo, the rest of the weasels, and Angel are on one team. Dawn, Koya, and Bludgeon are on another, and then Mikey and Venus are on their own team. They all go separate ways and try to find out where Dr. Barlow is holding the weasel mushroom. Although during their search, all 3 teams get hit with a psychological attack, and this attack reveals all their biggest weaknesses. So yeah, everyone's tripping in the sewers, but Venus, using her dragon scale magic, breaks the attack for her and Michelangelo, and so they are able to find Dr. Barlow's hideout. They peek in to see what's going on, and they see that Groundchuck and Dirtbag have already captured the other teams. You can see them all lying on the ground. They likely got taken out during the psychological attack. Mikey and Venus sneak in and try to wake them up, but Leatherhead sees them. Although Leatherhead says help and uses his dragon scale in his abdomen and blasts it at Leonardo to wake him up, but then Dr. Barlow starts speaking to Leatherhead and has him in his control again. He starts going after Venus, Leonardo, and Michelangelo now. Groundchuck and Dirtbag also realize what's going on and they jump into the fight as well. In a moment of panic, Dr. Barlow grabs the weasel mushroom and the dragon scales and makes a run for it. Venus chases after him, while Mikey and Leonardo fight Leatherhead and Groundchuck and Dirtbag. It's during the fight here that Leonardo realizes that if you destroy the dragon scales on the creatures, that it kills them, and we see this when Leonardo destroys the dragon scale on Groundchuck and Dirtbag. But now Michelangelo and Leonardo have to face Leatherhead. We jump over to Venus, who catches up to Barlow, and she tells him to let the weasel mushroom go. Barlow, using his dragon scale energy, blasts Venus down, and it's during this moment that we see Barlow start to change. Venus realizes that Barlow finally did it. Using the dragon scale magic, Barlow is starting to regain his human form, something he's been trying to do since the mutant bomb went off so long ago. This seems to have increased his powers as well. We next jump over to Donatello, who's still knocked out from the psychological attack that Barlow did on all of them. Although Donatello is having visions while he's knocked out, and it's visions of a giant shark head, Armagon, swallowing them all up. Back with Leatherhead, we see that Leonardo and Michelangelo realize that they have to find Barlow's crow, spider, possum, and bat minions, the ones that we saw earlier, because they're likely the ones now controlling Leatherhead. Mushroom, the weasel, who now has a dragon scale attached to her, talks to Leatherhead telepathically and tells him to wake up. Leatherhead stops the attack, and this is when we see the crow and bat minion come down to snap him out of it. Leo and Michelangelo see this and go to attack the minions. Leatherhead now begins to help the turtles and begins ripping out the dragon scales out of the little critters. He knows without this, they can't control him anymore. The turtles do the same to the other minions. Leatherhead then does it to himself, and all of this seems to affect Dr. Barlow. It appears that he can't draw from the others anymore, and because of this, now he can't control his transformation anymore. And this turns him into a big ugly mouse monster. Venus runs away to get back to the rest of the turtles, and right behind her is Dr. Barlow, but now in that big monster mouse form. He yells that we're all abominations and that I'm gonna put all of us out of our misery, and he starts attacking everyone. The group pins him down, and Leo and Koya begin ripping out the dragon scale from him, but for him, for some reason, when they remove it, the scale just keeps multiplying. Venus then here uses her magic that she says she learned from her future self during the Armageddon game to help out. She blasts Barlow with the magic, but she needs a little help. This is when Mushroom, the weasel, who also has that dragon scale attached to her, uses the dragon scale to help Venus, and she also blasts at Dr. Barlow. After the blast, we see that Dr. Barlow has been turned into what looks like a mutant mouse, but just like a regular mutant mouse. He's not that big, maybe about the size of one of the weasels, and you see him fall to his knees and yell no, that why couldn't they have just killed him? The fight is over. Dr. Barlow has been defeated. Leonardo says we'll hand them over to the police. Let's get out of here. A couple things of note here. You see that the weasel mushroom keeps the dragon scale in her abdomen, so that doesn't get removed. We also see that Angel says that she'll take the weasels back to Alapex, and we also see Leatherhead say goodbye to the group, that he's good now, that there won't be any more trouble from him. A little bit of time passes, and we see that Alapex is reunited with the weasels. Angel says that it was all thanks to the turtles. Alapex is happy. The weasels are safe, and we see that Raphael doesn't say anything. He just smiles and leaves. We hear Alapex say that she wants to give the weasels a different life, more peaceful, that she wants to take them out to Alaska where she had a peaceful trip once. Angel says do it, and she hugs her, and later on we see them hitch a ride on the train, although it does look like Leatherhead is following them, but we never find out exactly why. Back at the lair, all 6 turtles are together for the first time. Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, Donatello, Jenica, and Venus. I believe this is the first time we see them all together, although they are missing Lita, the little pink one, and they're all there with April eating pizza. Now you see they have a discussion about differing opinions regarding the pizza, and this is where Leonardo realizes that everyone is sort of growing apart, but that it's okay, and that he wants to go live in Northampton at the farmhouse on a more permanent basis, but that it's cool if the rest of them want to go with him or don't want to. He just wants them all to know that he doesn't want them to feel obligated anymore, that he's not their commander, that he wants them to feel like they're free. Donatello says that he would like to go with him, but that he'll have to catch up, that he first has to get some stuff collected from his lab, but that when he does meet up with Leo in Northampton, he wants to go revisit the thin places again, that pocket dimension from the Armageddon game where everything went down. Michelangelo says that he feels he should stay in the city. Jenica says, well then it's up to her, Michelangelo, and Raphael to protect Mutant Town, but Raphael says that he's leaving too, that he's gonna do a little bit of a road trip to clear his head and figure some things out, ride his motorcycle cross country. This catches everyone off guard, but everyone is happy for him, and the next day they all say their goodbyes. We see Leonardo packing up to go to the farmhouse, Raphael gets ready to go on his motorcycle, and they all do a big group hug before they go their separate ways. A look of concern then falls over Donatello's face, as he knows what's coming in the future, or at least has an idea. He tells April that he has to find Venus so that they can get to work and prevent anything bad from happening. A short time after this, we see that he, Donatello, Venus, and April are in Dawn's lab. April says to give her some info on what's going on. Venus simply says Armagon, and then Dawn says, right, we're going to fix everything. and it's here he can be seen holding the pencil with the magic stone on it, the one that can do spells and stuff and bring drawings to life. We also see Donatello has future Donatello's journal, as well as the anti-gravity gauntlet with the little mystic crystals on it. Things are about to get nuts. The story next picks up in Northampton. Donatello, April, Leo, and Venus enter the Thin Place. This seems to be somewhere in the forest, nearby the farmhouse. They're going through future Donatello's journal. Leonardo says that he doesn't want to get in the way, so he steps away and goes back into like the regular part of the world where the farmhouse is. Leonardo brought his students here to train with him, so they're there at the farmhouse, Bob, Lita, and Carmen. So that'll keep him busy for a while. Back with Donatello, April's still in disbelief about him getting this book from a future version of himself. But Venus says that it's true, that they both saw it, and that they both also saw their eventual deaths at the hands of Armagon. But Don says that they're now here to fix that. You see that Donatello is trying to create a wormhole to return back to that time period that he and Venus went to during the Armageddon game story arc. He wants to find his future self and learn more from him, and see if he can reveal some of the redacted passages from the journal. So these parts here that are blacked out, that it must be the key to stopping Armagon. Now, using the anti-gravity gauntlet and the magic stone pencil and other similar magic stones, which apparently are crystallized ooze, which contain Q&A, we'll explain that in a little bit, and some other machines that Donatello has set up there, plus some mystic powers that Don learned in the Armageddon game, he creates a temporal gateway. So yeah, like a little wormhole. Although on this first attempt, the gateway is too small, and so Donatello says that they'll have to try again tomorrow with some adjustments. They need to let the crystals recharge, although when they leave to go back to the farmhouse, they do leave the small portal unattended. Back at the farmhouse, Leonardo asks if leaving the portal unattended is a good idea. Donatello says that it's okay because it's protected by the sigils that are there. Leonardo then says that Donatello looks on edge. Donatello says that it's because this is how it all starts, that the turtles are all scattered, and that that's what starts the apocalyptic Armagon future that he saw in the Armageddon game. Leonardo says though that they're not estranged, that they're just doing what families do, but you can tell that Donatello is still shook. Later that night, while everybody is sleeping in the farmhouse, we see that a future version of Bob comes and visits present-day Bob. It seems that future Bob must have made his way through the wormhole. This future Bob looks a lot more sinister than present-day Bob. Future Bob tells present-day Bob that in the future, Bob is still a mutant, but that present-day Bob can change that by stopping Donatello's time travel experiment. Also that he, future Bob, knows someone that can return him back to human. He's talking about Armagon. But that being, Armagon, needs present-day Bob's help. Future Bob gives present-day Bob a little cube device and tells present-day Bob to put it on and never let it out of his sight. He then tells present-day Bob to follow him. Future Bob takes present-day Bob to the Thin Place where Don's machines are set up. He finally convinces present-day Bob. Present-day Bob takes down all the sigils, which causes something hanging around future Bob's neck to start glowing. The sigils are removed and the machine begins to make noises and create a glow. This wakes up Donatello, who was sleeping in the farmhouse, and him and Venus rush to go see what's going on. Venus tries to grab Bob when she gets there to pull him away from the wormhole, but future Bob, who's wearing a cloak so that no one can identify who he is, pulls present-day Bob away from Venus and throws present-day Bob into the portal. Venus tries to fight future Bob, but future Bob is too powerful, and during the fight extracts Q&A from Venus. So let's explain Q&A really quick before we go any further, as it's going to get brought up quite a bit here leading to the end of the story. They explained it in the Armageddon game as it kind of being like DNA. Don called it the temporal component of DNA, a dimensional manifold existing outside of time, yet existing inside of all of us. In layman's terms, it's like a special part of our DNA that doesn't follow the usual rules of time. Imagine it like as an extra layer or dimension inside of every person that connects them to something beyond the normal flow of time. Pretty much this suggests that there are aspects of our being that exist outside of the typical past, present, and future. And Donatello says in the Armageddon game that it must contain a lot of energy to be able to move against the current of time, that it should violate the laws of physics. So yeah, future Bob is probably extracting it for that power, and you see the Q&A that he extracts from Venus go into that little medallion thing that he has on his chest. Anyways, Don jumps in to help, but Venus also ends up getting thrown into the portal. Future Bob then says that he was trained by Leonardo and that he knows how to beat all of them, and then we see him throw Donatello into the portal. We see that the portal sends Donatello Donatello, Venus, and present-day Bob 12 million years into the past, still in Northampton. The portal appears to hold the three of them up in the air, right above where a giant megalodon is swimming in the water. The beast jumps up to eat the group, so Don, using his gauntlet, and Venus, using her magic, create a protectant bubble around them, and as they do this causes something to where the portal pulls them all back into it. But Donatello notices that not only is the megalodon being pulled along with them, but that it also begins to mutate because of the ooze elements that are in the magic crystals that are in his gauntlet. The four of them, Don, Venus, and Bob, and the megalodon, end up in a void at the end of time. So yeah, the very end of time. And this is where it dawns on Donatello that he has come face to face with Armagon, that he, Donatello, is the one responsible for the creation of this monster. Back at the farmhouse, everyone else can now see the glow coming from the forest. Leonardo has Carmen take Lita back inside, while he and April go to investigate the disruption in the forest. They see future Bob at the wormhole, and they mistake him for present-day Bob. Leonardo asks why Bob is there, and April tries to shut down the wormhole, but they are interrupted by these bizarre creatures, which future Bob actually helps Leonardo fight, most likely though to blend in and make it seem like he's their version of Bob. April continues to work on the wormhole, and after she takes a look at it a little bit, she tells them that she has terrible news, that the instruments are telling her that Donatello and Venus went inside of the wormhole, that there's also a third biosignature as well, but that she doesn't know who that is. Leonardo and April try to figure out what happened, and meanwhile you see that future Bob is secretly extracting Q&A from April, and you see that Q&A also going inside of his medallion on his chest. And you see future Bob say to himself, "More energy for you, master," talking about Armagon. So yeah, all that Q&A that he's taking from people appears to be going into that medallion on his chest, and that somehow seems to be feeding Armagon with Q&A energy, which sounds really powerful, so it's probably how he is able to travel through time. Leonardo and April go back to the machines that Don was working on to try to figure out if they can bring him back. Meanwhile, future Bob stands by, as no one suspects anything about him yet. They just think he's regular Bob. Back in the void, Venus, Don, and present-day Bob are watching Armagon absorb the Q&A. Suddenly, Don and Venus begin to feel Armagon trying to communicate with them through the Q&A. It tries to convey pain, anger, and rage, and the anger is towards Donatello for creating him. Donatello attempts to continue the dialogue with Armagon, but Armagon ends up moving through a portal. They try to chase him, but they end up in a separate branch of time. It looks like they're in the future that he and Venus were in during the Armageddon game, where Donatello got future Donatello's journal. They are approached by a hooded figure, and you find out that it's future Leonardo. He explains how he and the other turtles drifted apart throughout the years, that Raphael has disappeared, and Mikey as well, that they both, on separate occasions, left at some point, and that no one has heard from them since. He says that Jenica is no longer there either, that she went and started a family, that they used to communicate through their mystic stones from time to time, but that it has been silent for years. Future Leonardo then tells Donatello that future Donatello became a full-fledged sorcerer and withdrew from all of them. And that makes sense. That's kind of like the form we saw him in when Donatello visited this future in the Armageddon game. Donatello did look like a sorcerer. Future Leo then says that future Donatello then created his own children. Present-day Don is taken back by this. This is a crazy revelation. Don asks if future Donatello is still alive. Future Leonardo says yes, that he lives in a tower west, near Bludgeon and future Venus's Aura Clan training grounds. So again, how we saw in the Armageddon game. Venus says that they must go there before Armagon arrives and learn what they can from future Donatello. Future Leonardo tells them to rest up and eat first, and that after they can go. Later that evening, the group eats and they reminisce about a time when they were all together. But we see present-day Bob, our Bob, sneak away, and he messes with his device that his future self gave him. The next morning, they all head out and go to future Donatello's tower, but we see that it's too late. Armagon's portal has opened up in the sky. Like how we saw in the Armageddon game, Donatello comes to the conclusion that Armagon is likely traveling backwards from the end of time to the moment of his mutation, targeting Donatello at each chance in an attempt to prevent his own mutation. Armagon is in pain and doesn't want to exist, and he also hates Donatello for creating him, so he wants to destroy himself and Donatello and anything that comes in his way. Our group heads down to the training grounds to try to save some of the people there from Armagon. While this is happening, Donatello tells Venus if they could figure out the temporal coordinates, that they could figure out how to go back in time and prevent Armagon's mutation. That way Armagon doesn't start going after Donatello. But just as they discuss this, things start getting crazy. Future Leonardo urges Donatello to run and gives him his Mystic Stone. Leonardo then tries in vain to fight off Armagon, but Leonardo is devoured. It seems all but over, but then suddenly 3 visitors arrive: Renette, future Lita, and what looks like future Raphael. Back in the present, Leonardo, April, and Carmen are all by Donatello's machines, trying to figure out a way to bring Donatello and Venus back, although they're having to deal with those creatures that keep spawning. Also, during all this, something keeps happening to April and Carmen. It's almost like they freeze and then snap out of it. Future Bob appears to be doing something to them, although Leonardo thinks that it possibly could be energy radiating from the wormhole. He asks April if there's some way they can plug it, but April says she doesn't think they should, that if it closes, that it's possible they could lose Dawn and Venus forever. April says that she's stuck, so she suggests that they should reach out to their scientist friends, Harold and Libby, and also Fugitoid. A bit later, back at the farmhouse, we see that Leonardo calls Michelangelo, and it sounds like Leonardo is asking for the other turtles. Michelangelo says that Raphael's phone is still off, and that the last thing he heard was that he was traveling through Ohio. Then he says that Jenica went on tour with her band. So yeah, Leonardo's all out of luck. There's no way to get a hold of Raphael or Jenica, but Michelangelo does say that he'll come. So there you go, Michelangelo is on his way. While they wait, Leo, Carmen, and future Bob, who everyone thinks is regular Bob, end up training. Bob pulls a move that surprises Leonardo, because if you remember, at this point in time, Bob is supposed to be just a rookie. Leonardo asks where he learned that, but Bob acts mysterious and just walks away. Meanwhile, April is on a call with Fugitoid, Harold, Libby, and Mona Lisa. Fugitoid says that the wormhole is collapsing, and this causes April to freak out a little bit. We jump back over to Dawn, Venus, and present-day Bob. We see that they are in what's called the 79th dimension of null time. They're there with Renette, future Lita, and future Raphael. Renette scorns Donatello about having told him before not to mess with time. This was on one of their previous adventures. Then we see Raphael, who's acting unusual. He talks to Casey Jones' mask and tells it that they never thought they'd see Leonardo again. Donatello looks at him and says, "I'm Donatello, not Leonardo." Donatello then asks Renette if Raphael's okay. Renette says no, that's what happens when you fiddle with time too much, that he's suffering from temporal psychosis and advanced temporal atrophy. Lita says that he got like that because he time traveled too many times without any safeguards, that the flow of time eroded him, that there's no cure, so that they're just letting him convalesce there at the time temple, that he likes to tag along with her and Renette. Dawn tells Renette about his plan to go back in time to when he created the wormhole and stopping it from happening so that he doesn't create Armagon in the first place. But Renette says she can't let him do that, that also if he did that, then all these events they've been through would be erased, and that he would have never learned about his role in Armagon's existence in the first place. Dawn asks what about going even further back. Renette says no again, that's forbidden by temporal law. Lita then says that she and Renette have had to stitch up altered past events more often recently because there's been an uptick in timeline disturbances. Renette says that they had to set up a time prison for the worst temporal offenders. Renette then says that if Dawn keeps it up, he'll end up with temporal psychosis, just like Raphael. But then she says that she loves them and that they'll try to figure something out, but that right now they gotta prepare, that Armagon has most likely tracked them there to the time temple and that he's probably on his way. Donatello then says that he has a theory that Armagon is trying to find the version of him, Dawn, before Dawn ran the experiment that created Armagon, and that Armagon is probably trying to kill that past version of Dawn so that Dawn never creates Armagon. Obviously this would kill Donatello as well, so no good. We get a quick moment here where Donatello says to Lita that he's proud of her becoming a time tress, and then we hear Lita say thanks Dad, that she couldn't have done it without him or Aunt Venus. Then she says oops, forget I said that. So we'll see what that's about, but it sounds like Donatello ends up adopting Lita at some point. Renette then tells Lita to come to the ritual chamber now. In the chamber, we see them performing some type of magic to make a force field to protect the temple. Lita says she wanted to tell Dawn and Venus who Bob really is, but Renette says no, that part of being a Time Lord is knowing how and when to keep secrets. Meanwhile, back with Venus, Dawn, and Bob, who are waiting in a nearby room, we see future Raphael approach Venus, and he gives her his mystic rock, so kind of like the one Leonardo gave Donatello. He says that he forgets what it means, but that he thinks he remembers it being good, and that he hung on to it for a long time. Venus asks if he wants her to tell him what it is, but Raphael says no, you take it. Venus says that she promised promises she'll get it where it needs to go. Also around this time, we see that Bob ends up sneaking around the temple. He goes to the time prison where we saw all the prisoners that are in those pods, and it looks like he sees that he's one of the prisoners. When this happens, the device on his wrist that future Bob gave him starts going off, and we begin to hear rumbling. Armagon has arrived, and we see outside that he's trying to eat the time temple. Donatello and Venus hear what's going on, but before they go see, Venus gives Donatello future Raphael's mystic stone. She says treasure it. Donatello and Venus begin running through the halls. He calls out for Bob, and Bob finds them. He asks what's the plan, but Donatello says he doesn't know yet. It's during this that Bob seems to confess to Donatello that this is all his fault, that he led Armagon to them, that he didn't mean to, but that the device that he's wearing appears to be some type of a beacon that lets Armagon know where they're at, that his future self gave it to him, that in exchange Armagon would help Bob go back to being human. Bob says that he's sorry, but Venus tells Bob that they'll discuss it later, that right now they need to focus on surviving. Back in the ritual chamber, Lita and Renette are trying their hardest to keep the force field up around the time temple, but it's getting harder to do so. Renette tells Lita to get a message out to Lord Simultaneous, Renette's old master, and the council, in case the temple is destroyed, but Lita says she has to do something first. Renette yells at her, but Lita says sorry, that she has to get her family somewhere safe, and she begins to open up a portal. Donatello tells Lita that her and Raphael should come with them, but Lita says she can't, that her duty is there, that she's a timetress now, that it has to be this way, Dad, and to go and be proud of her. Don yells no and reaches out to her as he gets pulled into the portal. Afterwards, we see that Armagon crushes the time temple, swallowing it up whole, and then he goes through a wormhole. Donatello, Venus, and Bob land in an alley somewhere, and as soon as they land, Donatello gets up and starts yelling at Bob. He tells him to tell him everything. Don starts crying and says they're all gone because of you. Venus tries to calm down Donatello and tells him that it's more complex than that they can talk it out later, but that they have to figure out where they're at. Then we hear a voice say, well, 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 look who it is. And we see that it's the future version of Jenica, and she appears to be a little bit of a cyborg now. She tells them, let me give you the grand tour. And then we see that in the future, Mutant Town has become Mutant City. You see that future Jenica takes them back to her place. You can see over the years that she became a private eye. She says that she's been searching for Mikey for years, but that he isolated himself when his big celebrity thing got too much for him. Donatello tells her that they just came from a future where Mikey was missing as well. Donatello asks what happened to him. Jenica says a lot, and that he left a lot of junk behind as well, but that she managed to save one thing, and we see that it's his talisman, his little mystic stone symbol figure, like how future Raph gave Venus and future Leonardo gave Donatello, except this one's Mikey's, and you can see that future Jenica has hers as well. Jenica says that back in the day, so earlier on in the story, before the Armageddon game and all that, when future Lita came to visit them, future Lita told her that these talisman stone symbols would be important one day, so Jenica kept them. It's during this conversation that Bob explains everything that happened, and that how he was the one that initially messed up the time stuff that Don was working on in the woods, because his future self came and told him that it was the only way for him to turn human again. Donatello then tells him that he doesn't know if he could forgive Bob, and we see Bob say that he doesn't have to, that he just wanted to get it out in the open, that he would have done it earlier if he knew what would have happened. Then we see Bob grab the device from his wrist, and he slams it on the ground, breaking it. Venus then tells Bob that she forgives him, that she understands self-loathing, that she used to be human as well, and has been changed a number of times since then. Here we see Don soften up, and then he says that he can also understand to a certain degree that it was jarring when his consciousness was put into a robot body when he almost died once. He's talking about the time that Bebop and Rocksteady almost killed him back in the day. Back in the present, Leonardo and April are trying to figure out the collapsing wormhole issue. They're trying to decipher all of Donatello's notes. April runs out of space on her notebook, so she continues to decipher the symbols that she's seeing in the notes by writing them on her own arm. They start noticing patterns in the symbols, and April comes to the conclusion that this is all like her biomedical engineering course that she took in college, that all the symbols and patterns are like a magical version of systems biology. She explains that it's like a complex system that has its own properties that its individual parts don't have, that Don and Venus would use magic to manipulate space and time depending on which combination of symbols they used, that she and Leonardo may be able to stabilize the wormhole if they do the right spell or the right combination. April then says that according to the data, that the other mystery source that went into the wormhole with Donatello and Venus is Bob. You then see Leonardo ask, then who's the Bob that's with them right now? But this is where we see April and Leonardo black out. The two wake up, but are now back at the farmhouse. Leonardo mentions something about them being in a trance, likely caused by Future Bob, who's there with them. Leo realizes that Carmen and Little Lita are also there, but they're also in a trance, and he snaps them out of it. Everyone doesn't know what happened, but April then says, Leonardo, remember, the Bob that's here with us isn't our Bob. And then we see the writings on April's arm begin to glow. You see that Future Bob is now there with them, and he tells the group sorry about this, that he had their Bob mess up Donatello's equipment, and that he's there on the behalf of Armagon. Now, while he's talking and explaining this to everybody, you can see that April begins drawing the symbols that she drew on her arms on everyone else's arms. Leonardo tells April to get little Lita out of here, and then Bob begins an attack on Leonardo, and you see him tell Leonardo that he's doing this because he needs to extract more of Leonardo's Q&A. Carmen jumps in to help Leonardo, but this future version of Bob is a lot more skilled than their version. As they fight, Bob says that Armagon promised him if he collects enough Q&A that he will make Bob human again, and then we see that Bob starts to begin to steal Q&A from Carmen. Leo breaks it up, but then Future Bob starts summoning more of those little critter creatures that attacked them earlier. Everyone starts getting overwhelmed, and eventually Bob grabs both Leonardo and Carmen, and he begins to drain both of them of their Q&A at the same time. Meanwhile, the little critter creatures start heading towards April and Lita. April calls out to Leonardo, but Leonardo is down, and just as the creatures get to April and Lita, we see that Michelangelo and Koya show up. Back in the future with Future Jenica, Don says how he wishes he knew which version of him Armagon was looking to destroy, but he also says at the same time that his gauntlet doesn't even have enough energy to take them back very far anyways, so that they're going to have to make smaller jumps in time regardless. Bob then chimes in and says, even so, how are we even supposed to fight Armagon? And he's right, Armagon is massive. Donatello says that he doesn't know, but that they still need to figure out a way to decipher Future Donatello's journal, that he's convinced there's something in there that can help them. Jenica then says that Future Don actually came through there not that long ago. She says that he came with his weird kids, other turtles that he drew up with the magic crystal pencil. Donatello then says that maybe they can find them and ask Future Donatello to make sense of the journal, but Jenica says that he already left, that he took off to an even further future. Donatello says if so, he must have left behind a time tunnel, the way Armagon does when he travels through time, that they need to find the tunnel so that they can follow him wherever he went. Jenica then says that Future Donatello was studying Armagon. Donatello then asks what did he say, but Jenica says that she doesn't know, that she doesn't get that stuff, something about tracking the Q&A inside of Armagon. This gives Venus an idea. She says since Armagon devours Q&A, could every particle he's consumed still exist inside of him? That maybe Armagon carries every soul inside of him that he's ever devoured. Donatello says yes, that matter can't be destroyed, so it has to exist somewhere inside of him. Also that it has to be how he fuels his time traveling abilities. Bob then says that maybe they can reverse engineer the device that Future Bob gave him, the one that allowed Armagon to track him, but use it this time to try to track Armagon instead. Donatello then says that it could be risky, but that he could try to reverse the connection. But just as they come up with this plan, we hear that the police arrive to Jenica's place, and they begin to slam on Jenica's door. Donatello looks at Jenica and asks what did she do. Future Jenica says that she just had a little bit of a rough patch. Jenica and Bob begin to try to barricade the door, but the police begin to get in. Meanwhile, Venus and Dawn begin to try to put back together the device that Bob broke earlier so they can reverse engineer it. The police finally get in, and just as they do, Donatello is able to attach the repaired device to his gauntlet. Bob and Jenica fight the police, but while this is happening, Donatello's eyes suddenly begin to glow. Donatello says, I hear him. And then we can see that Donatello sees where Armagon is and where he's heading. Don snaps out of it, and he tells Venus that Armagon is going back further than they thought, that he's going after the Hamatos, so the turtles in their past human lives, when they were alive in feudal Japan, before they were reincarnated as turtles. But yeah, this means if Armagon's successful, that the turtles will be completely erased from the timeline. Back in the present, Michelangelo, Koya, and an astral projection of Bludgeon are now there to help Leonardo fight against Future Bob. April tells Future Bob that he can't erase their memories anymore, that they're protected now, likely because of the symbols that she drew on all of their arms. Leo tells Future Bob that they don't have to do this, that bargain that Bob did with Armagon to make him human again can be maybe something that the good guys can help Bob with, that Bob doesn't have to team up with Armagon. Future Bob says that they can't help, that he, Bob, can only collect Q&A for Armagon, that it's like like Armagon's food, and that it lets him be free from his timeless prison in the furthest future, and that when Armagon is done with his mission, he'll take the right Q&A out of Bob and make him human again. Leonardo then asks Bob what exactly is Q&A, and how will Armagon use it to reverse his mutation, that maybe he, Leo, can help Bob. But Bob says again that there's no way, that this has to do with time, that quantinucleic acid, the temporal component of DNA, is what Q&A is, that it encodes everything you are, were, or ever will be. And then we see future Bob begins to extract Q&A from little Lita. Mikey tries to get in the middle of it, but it doesn't work. The Q&A that Bob is extracting from little Lita goes straight through him. Bob says mutation, memories, skill, knowledge can be removed at the temporal level, that's Armagon's gift. And it's here when we see little Lita turn from a mutant turtle back into her original human form, which everyone starts freaking out about. Lita had already accepted becoming a turtle. She liked the way she was, and this is not what she wanted. Everyone now starts going after Bob, and he makes a break for it. Leonardo yells at future Bob that he'll pay for what he did to Lita, but Bob yells back, "No, I won't. You'll never see me again." And we see Bob jump into a wormhole and disappear. Michelangelo grabs Leonardo and tells him let him go, that everyone is safe at least. But Leonardo snaps, and he says that they're not safe, that what happened to Lita is a violation, and that he, Leonardo, should have stopped it, that he failed her, and that he failed Bob, likely as a sensei, since this is the way he becomes in the future. Then we see that Leonardo begins to cry, and Michelangelo hugs him. Michelangelo, Koya, and Bludgeon now see the portal for the first time, and Leonardo explains that Donatello, Venus, and present-day Bob are in there. Bludgeon says that she can tell that the portal is collapsing. They run to go and tell April. Michelangelo asks if he can help, but Leonardo tells him that he and April have already figured it out, that there's a specific magic that they need to do to hold it open. So they begin to place the sigils in a specific order. Beams of green light from the sigils start connecting and then connect to the portal. It appears that Leonardo and April were correct. The portal has stabilized, but only as long as the sigils stay in place. That now they just have to hope that Donatello will find his way back to it. Back in Jenica's future Jenica, Donatello, Venus, and Bob are now being chased by the police. They ask Donatello if he can just open a portal with his gauntlet, but Donatello says that it's too risky, that they could end up anywhere, that what they really need to do is find the time hole that future Donatello left behind. Jenica says she knows where it is, that she just missed them and wanted to at least spend a little bit of time with them, that she's been lonely without them. She ends up taking them to the place where future Donatello left the time hole, but when they get there, the police catch up. Future Jenica says to Donatello to get out of here, and you see her let herself get arrested. Donatello says thank you, and he, Venus, and Bob go through the time portal. On the other side, they end up in a nice apartment, and it appears to be Michelangelo's apartment. This seems to be still in the future, but not as far into the future as Jenica's future that they were just in. You can see that Michelangelo's cat, Clunk, is still alive. Future Michelangelo is there, and you can see that by this point, he has become a big TV star and has had a big career in show business. He seems to know that Donatello is from the past. Don says yes, but that they actually just came from the future and that it's a long story. Michelangelo says that it's okay, that he remembers, that the three of them went into a time portal, and then he talks about how he, Michelangelo, and Leonardo had to fight those monsters in the woods, and pretty much, yeah, all the stuff we're seeing in the present. Don never knew about the monsters and critters that came after he went into the wormhole, so he asks Michelangelo what happened. Michelangelo tells him about Evil Bob and something called Armagon, but that Leonardo wouldn't explain that part to him. But then Michelangelo got famous, and that things got kind of weird after that. That first he lived in LA, then he lived in Japan, while everyone else ended up doing their own thing. Donatello then asks if another future version of Donatello has been there. Michelangelo says no, just him. Suddenly though, Venus says that she senses future Donatello, that he's there. You see, Venus shares a connection with Donatello because when she was made, the shell they used for her was Donatello's old shell that was broken when he almost died back in the day at the hands of Bebop and Rocksteady. So she can always sense him when he's nearby, and they can like telepathically communicate with each other. So yeah, this connection also seems to apply to future Donatello. Present day Donatello then tells future Mikey that they need to figure out where future Donatello is so that they can time travel to feudal Japan because they're all in danger. Although Mikey seems nonchalant about everything and tells Don just to chill with him for a bit, that feudal Japan isn't going anywhere. But here we see Venus snap at Michelangelo, and she tells him that he should be ashamed of himself, that his brothers need him. Michelangelo apologizes and tells them that it's just that he's been holed up in his apartment ever since he got really famous, that ever since his stardom, he can't tell who's real and who just wants a piece of him, that he wishes that sometimes he could just disappear. Here we see Donatello pull out the little talisman figure, the little stone that future Jenica gave him that belonged to Michelangelo. Mikey says that he remembers, that they had them so they'd always have some type of connection. Donatello tells him, those were good times, right? Michelangelo agrees. But then suddenly, a portal opens up and future Bob steps out. Present day Bob attacks future Bob, but future Bob grabs him by the neck. back. Present-day Bob tells him, "I'll never be like you." Future Bob then tells him that looking at his younger self makes him sick, that present-day Bob doesn't understand how stupid he sounds, but that he'll understand soon. And then we see an even bigger portal open up outside of the apartment building, and it's Armagon, and it looks like he's about to devour the entire building. Venus tells Donatello that they have to go, that she can try to focus on future Donatello since he's nearby, that maybe they can still find him. Donatello hears what Venus is saying, but he says that they must help present-day Bob, who's still fighting with future Bob. A struggle ensues, but future Bob in the struggle grabs present-day Bob and says, "You'll never become like me. You are me. You'll come out the other side of this, reborn." And we see future Bob throw present-day Bob through the apartment window and into the mouth of Armagon. We see that Armagon begins to consume present-day Bob until eventually Bob is fully consumed. Back in the apartment, Michelangelo tells Donnie and Venus to get out of there, that he'll handle future Bob, that they know what they gotta do. Mikey begins to fight future Bob. Donatello wants to stay back and help Michelangelo, but Venus says that they have to go. She says that she can still sense future Donatello, and so they leave Michelangelo behind, who gets beat down by future Bob. But when Michelangelo's laying on the ground, you see him smiling, as he knows he gave Donatello and Venus a head start. Outside, we see that Venus and Donatello make it out to the street, and they see future Donatello. Future Donatello opens up a portal and walks through it, so Donatello and Venus go through it as well to follow him. You see that this time they're taken to the past. They are in the lab where the Ninja Turtles were before they got mutated. At the beginning of this entire series, Donatello says that he wonders if this is the night it happens, the night that they're mutated. Donatello also says that he thinks he knows why future Donatello would want to come here. Suddenly, unmutated Splinter appears, as he was also in this lab where they all got mutated. Donatello is happy to see his father, even in this unmutated form, and he has a quick moment with him. Don misses Splinter, since in the present he has already passed away. So yeah, the two share a moment, but then they hear somebody coming, and so Donatello and Venus hide. We see that it's April, but from the past, when she used to work at the lab, and it does appear that this is the night the Turtles get mutated. The Foot Clan shows up, how they did on that night, and Venus says that they have to help April, but Donatello says that they can't, that it has to happen this way, so that he and his brothers and Splinter get mutated. Although something goes wrong, some of the Foot Clan notice Donatello and Venus and begin attacking them. This is not supposed to happen. Donatello tells Venus that they have to get these guys back on track. Donatello has a plan, and he leads the fight into the back alley of the lab, though here they run into another issue, as the fight gets tangled up with an alley cat that happened to be there at the time. This alley cat is the pre-mutated version of Hob, and he plays a part in the Turtles' mutation and everything as well. Now, because he gets tangled up in the fight, Donatello begins to fear for old Hob's safety, so he tells Venus to protect the cat. Luckily, Donatello and Venus are able to protect old Hob, and they also knock out the ninjas. Then they see the moment, like it happened in the past, where Splinter and the Turtles fall into the alley with the ooze that breaks and gets all over them. Donatello then tells Venus to release the cat next to the Turtles and Splinter, as in their origin, the way it played out in the past, old Hob is supposed to take Raphael. So yeah, Donatello makes sure that this plays out the same way. So yeah, it appears that everything goes according to plan, but then suddenly another wormhole opens up and it's future Bob. Donatello tells Venus that they have to lead him away from the alley because the events with the Turtles and old Hob and Splinter need to play out the way they originally did. So they start running away and Bob begins to chase them. During the run, Venus says that she can sense future Donatello again, so Don tells her to lead the way. But future Bob catches up to them and he knocks Venus down, then grabs Donatello, and it looks like he's gonna kill Donatello. But then we hear a voice say, "Unhand him, villain," and we see that it's a group of 3 new turtles we've never seen before. Roy, Max, and Pre. These are the kids of future Donatello, the ones that Future Jenica said that he drew with the magic crystal pencil. Anyways, they knock out future Bob, and Venus puts future Bob into a containment bubble. Donatello then approaches these new turtles and tells them that he knows who they are, and he begins to ask them questions. You get the sense here that future Donatello, the one that created them, so their dad, was kind of a bad father to them. They all talk about him like if he wants nothing to do with them. Donatello then asks them if they're there on their own or if future Don came with them, but they say no, that he's not with them, that he'll abandon them somewhere so that he can go off and do his own thing. Venus says that their auras are exactly like future Donatello's, that it's them that she must have been sensing. One of the new turtles says that it's a long story, Q&A stuff, and we get a little bit of a backstory here about how they were created by future Donatello. They talk about how in the future Donatello had driven away his family, so he tried to create replacements by drawing them with the magic crystal pencil, but that most of them just faded away after a few days, but that he kept trying, that eventually he realized if he mixed his own Q&A with the crystal's Q&A, that it gave the drawings was the spark of life, but that even though he succeeded, the turtles he created, Roy, Max, and Pre, weren't what he wanted, that all he saw was the worst of himself in all of them, so he shunned them. Here, present-day Donatello says that he can't believe that he would become someone that would do that he looks at them and sees how they make up for all of his faults. Donatello says that they should come with him, that timeline be damned, that they could be a real family. One of the turtles, Pre, says that that's actually feasible, that this could be a causality loop, that this event could be the inspiration for Don to create them decades from now. But then suddenly another wormhole opens up, but this time it's future Donatello. Present-day Donatello confronts future Donatello. He tells him, "You have to help us." But future Donatello says, "Why should I?" That he just wants to experience simplicity, but that present-day Donatello has made things so complicated. Present-day Donatello pleads with future Donatello and talks about Armagon, but it seems that future Donatello has gone mad as he turns around and tells present-day Donatello that he just wants to be left alone and that it's time to erase these warp turtles, talking about the turtles that he created. You see that he pulls out the magic crystal pencil and starts going after them. Everyone tries to hold him back, but future Donatello is too powerful. He ends up killing one of the warp turtles, Max. Present-day Donatello yells out "murderer" and uses the power of his gauntlet to restrain future Donatello. Present-day Donatello tells him that they swore to Splinter before he died that they would never kill, and then he tells future Donatello that he'll never become like him. Present-day Donatello then begins to break down. He says, "I've lost too many people," and you see him unrestrain future Donatello. Future Donatello says it's hard to believe that he was once present-day Donatello, that it's sobering to see him full of life and excitement, that at his age, you forget how it could have been that way. Present-day Don then says, "Then please help us fight Armagon." But future Donatello says you can't fight him, that Armagon will never stop, that even if they figured out a way, the original moment of his creation will always exist in the furthest future. He will always be there, no matter how you change the timeline. Then future Donatello says that the only thing that he's discovered over the years of studying him is one thing, and then you see that he gives present-day Donatello a box with a little talisman mystic stone in it with a mysterious symbol on it. Present-day Donatello then asks future Donatello if he could also help him decipher the journal, but future Donatello just says, "You'll figure it out," and then he leaves through a portal. Present-day Donatello then asks Roy and Pre if they recognize the symbol on the talisman mystic stone that future Donatello gave them. Roy says yes, that it's the permanent sigil. Pre says that it protects an object or individual from the entropic effects of time, so pretty much that something or someone will not age. Donatello then asks Roy and Pre, well, if something can be made permanent, could he alter the sigil to create impermanence? They say yes, and so Donatello and the Warp Turtles start using the magic crystal pencil to alter the permanent symbol in future Donatello's journal. Pre tells Donatello to use this magic to remove the ink from the redacted parts of the journal that they were trying to figure out, and it works. The redacted parts of the journal are revealed. Donatello says that it's just coordinates, that it doesn't say to where or when, but Venus says that they have to take a chance on it. Donatello starts inputting the coordinates into his gauntlet and opens up another wormhole. But just as they're about to step through it, Future Bob breaks out of Venus's containment bubble. He charges towards the turtles, but just as Donatello is going through the portal, he does something, and it's almost like a spell that makes Bob begin to age very rapidly. This stops Bob in his tracks, and we see that all of Bob's hair begins to turn white. The portal closes, leaving Bob behind, and next we cut over to feudal Japan. We see that Donatello, Venus, and these new turtles are arriving at the time during the turtles' previous life as humans before they got reincarnated as turtles. You see that this is actually moments right after they were executed by the Shredder. You see the decapitated human bodies of the turtles and Splinter laid out as the Shredder and the Foot Clan walk away from just having killed them. You see that nearby, Krang and one of his lieutenants are watching what just happened, and you see Krang order his lieutenant to go get their science advisor and their team to collect DNA and Q&A from the bodies of the Hamatos, so the turtles when they were human. Dawn, Venus, Roy, and Pre are watching all of this, by the way, and Dawn says, "We did it. We made it here before Armagon." Krang takes off, and we see that his lieutenant starts going back to get more of their crew so they can follow Krang's orders. Donatello sees an opportunity here to swoop in and take out the lieutenant. After the lieutenant is taken out, Dawn sees his own human dead body from his past life laying there on the ground, and it's during this moment that suddenly Dawn gets a vision of his mother from this past past life. Tang Shen, she tells Donatello that this is the moment that Armagon wanted to devour. Donatello then says that he thinks he knows what he has to do now. Tang Shen, his mother, says yes, the reincarnation that he, Donatello, must take part in, or otherwise he and his brothers and his father's souls will never live out their new full lives as turtles and a rat. Donatello says that he wishes things were different, but that Armagon has to exist for all of this to happen. And then we see Donatello use his gauntlet to start extracting Q&A from the dead bodies of his human self and his family. Once he collects the Q&A, he says that he needs something to hold it in. Here we see Venus create some orbs using her mystic abilities, and the Q&A samples go into them. Then Tang Shen tells Donatello that their enemies are still on their way, that Donatello must perform the ritual again. At first he doesn't know what she's talking about, but then it clicks. She's talking about the binding ritual that the Shredder taught them during the Armageddon game, but Donatello also says that he wishes he had his brothers and his sister Jenica there to help them, since it took all of them to perform the ritual last time. But then he realizes that wait, they could be here, at least a part of them, and we see him pull out all of their original talisman pieces, those little mystic stones, and he says that they can probably still hold the spell together, at least for a little bit. And so he asks Roy, Pre, and Venus to take the talisman stones, and they begin the ritual. They draw a bellflower sigil into the ground, like the last time the regular turtles performed this during the Armageddon game. Donatello says, for the binding ritual to work, Armagon needs to be within the bellflower for the magic to take effect on him, that they'll have to corral him in there, that the radiant gravity of the Hamatos, or the turtles, that they learned about during the Armageddon game will be the force that binds him there. But first, Donatello says that they'll need to bring Armagon down to size, that the way he is now, he's just too massive, and so using the magic crystal pencil, he begins to draw a cube with an impermanent sigil on it. Donatello tells the rest of the turtles, for this to work, Armagon will have to swallow the cube to absorb its magic, that he'll let himself get swallowed if that's what it takes for Armagon to ingest it. They all plead with him not to, but Donatello says that it's his responsibility and that he's ready. Then suddenly a wormhole opens up and it's Future Bob as well as Armagon. He's here now. Future Bob yells at Donatello, telling him to hand over the Hamato Q&A. Donatello, Venus, Roy, and Pre get ready to fight, but then Donatello suddenly says sorry to Venus as he begins to run towards Armagon's mouth. He's going to let himself get devoured so he can get the sigil inside of Armagon. But then you hear Venus say I'm sorry too, as she uses her magic to take the cube from Donatello. She says it's time, and with the cube in her hand, she jumps into Armagon's mouth. She tells Donatello that he has so much left to do, and then we see Armagon chomp down, and then the magic from the cube starts going off. Suddenly, Armagon gets turned into this big burnt husk and falls to the ground. He just lies there steaming, and he looks like he's now smaller in size as well. Still pretty big, but nothing like before. When this happens, Future Bob suddenly starts having flashbacks of little Lita's memories, since he took a lot of her Q&A earlier in the story. He realizes that she was much happier as a mutant, and that he had taken that from her. Donatello uses this moment as an opportunity to take Bob out. He begins to hit him with his bow staff, and then he rips off Armagon's device from his chest, that thing that stored all the Q&A that he was stealing. When Donatello does this, all the Q&A that Future Bob had stolen begins to get released into the universe. Donatello says that he hopes it all goes back to wherever it's supposed to be. Then we see that Donatello is able to recover a piece of Venus's dragon scale from her shell. This is pretty much like the thing that made her come to life originally, but it's just one fragment, and he holds it in his hand as he looks at it with a sad look on his face. He says, Venus, I can't hear you anymore. As we mentioned before, the two had like a telepathic connection. The fact that he can't hear her anymore insinuates that she passed away. Donatello, Roy, and Pre look down at the shark carcass that was Armagon, and Donatello tells the new turtles, remember that they have to get Armagon into the bellflower. They end up getting him there, but when they do, Armagon suddenly springs back to life. Like a cornered animal, Armagon lashes out at everyone, and we see Donatello and the Warp Turtles fight back. At one point, Armagon gets a good bite on Donatello's arm, breaking the gauntlet. Donatello's been using the gauntlet, by the way, if you've noticed throughout the story, to create the wormholes to travel through time. But yeah, now the gauntlet is shattered. Now the fight continues, and the turtles end up seeing a vision of Venus that appears. Venus says, don't lose momentum, and Donatello says, right, your dragon scale, that this was her talisman stone, that she's always been here. Don uses the fragment of Venus's dragon scale and draws some type of sigil over Armagon. This does something to Armagon as his appearance changes. He now has limbs, and his whole body changes to like a shade of blue. Donatello then yells at Pre and Roy to leave the bellflower. Then Donatello tells Armagon that he knows that Armagon hates him for what he did, that Don can't destroy him, but that he can give him some peace. And we see Don jump into the air, and using the pencil with the magic crystal on it, Donatello draws another sigil over Armagon. And this sigil, mixed with the other sigil that he drew, ends up trapping Armagon in this like solidified form. He pretty much looks like a statue now. The fight is over. Donatello has defeated Armagon. Bob, now powerless, ends up staying behind with the Armagon statue, and we see that Donatello, Roy, and Pre walk away, although Bob looks back at them and he doesn't look pleased. Shortly after, we see that Donatello, Roy, and Pre are walking the lands of feudal Japan. During this walk, you can see that Donatello ends up speaking with his mother again. He tells her that he's tired, and Donatello's mom, Tang Shen, says that she knows that it's all done now. But then Donatello says, what about going into the time stream so that he can complete their reincarnation, that he still has to figure out a way to infuse their Hamato Q&A into their animal bodies. But Tang Shen says that that's not his duty, that the fact that he's still here means that the loop has already been closed. But Donatello tells her that he wants to see it happen to make sure that the reincarnation is done correctly. But Tang Shen just gives him a look and he says okay, that he gets it. He can't control everything. Tang Shen tells him that she's proud of him, and then we see the two hug, and Donatello tells her that he loves her. The sun starts to set as Donatello, Roy, and Pre continue to walk. Roy asks Donatello, so what now? Donatello simply answers, I don't know yet. We jump back to the present and we're at the farmhouse. We see a wormhole opens up and it's Donatello who steps out of it, but it seems like some time has passed since we just saw him in feudal Japan. It's not future Donatello, it's our present day Donatello, but he's dressed like future Donatello. It's not explained, but I get the sense that he must have used the permanent sigil to prevent him from aging until he found a way to get back, which must have taken a long time. He's probably like really old, but still in his young body, and is now returning to his family. But that's just me speculating. They don't explain it. If you look closely, it looks like he did some type of a makeshift repair to the gauntlet. You see that when he's coming to the farmhouse that it's winter now. There's snow everywhere, and we see that Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, Jenica, Lita, who's still in her human form, Casey and April and Sheena are all there at the farmhouse having fun in the snow, building snowmen, things like that. Suddenly, out of the woods, they see Donatello step out. You can tell that they haven't seen him in a while. Lita approaches Donatello first, and Donatello falls to his knees. Everyone runs up to him, and they all give him a big group hug. Donatello begins to cry. Now, there is an epilogue after all of this. We jump back in time, back to the lab, when the turtles were just regular turtles. In fact, we jump to a moment in time when they're still eggs at this point. They haven't even hatched yet, and Splinter was just a regular rat still. You see a portal open up, and someone walks through it. It's Venus, but she doesn't look solid, like a mist or a ghost or something. She eventually turns into her regular form, and we see her hunch over to look at the turtle eggs. She pulls out the orbs with the Hamato Q&A in them, and we see her transfer the Q&A from the orbs into the turtle eggs and Splinter. We're seeing exactly how the turtles were reincarnated from their past lives as humans into turtles. This is a huge moment for their origin that we've never seen before. She tells the eggs, I'll see you all one day soon. And she turns around and walks back into the portal where she came from, where we see two people waiting for her. I believe it's Hamato Yoshi and Tang Shen. So Splinter in his human form and his wife, or the turtles' mom. I think this is implying that Venus has died and is entering the afterlife. After this, we get one more final shot, and it's of one of the turtle eggs beginning to hatch. We see a turtle pop out, and we can still see the mystic power of Venus emanating from it. And that's how the IDW comics finished their initial 150 issue run. But the story's not over. These turtles' story is going to keep going. They're going to be doing a comics relaunch, which will drop July 24th, and that's with a whole new writer, Jason Aaron, and they're bringing on a bunch of new artists to kick it off.
Yes, and we're going to be starting a podcast discussing the relaunch.
Yeah, and it's not just the relaunch. We're going to be talking about all the comics that drop in July, and let's kind of go through them real quick. We're going to be talking about TMNT, the 40th anniversary one-shot, which that drops the book July 10th. Then we're going to be talking about The Untold Destiny of the Foot Clan, issue 5, which that book drops July 17th. Then we're going to be talking about Saturday Morning Adventures, issue 15, which that also drops July 17th. And then finally, we're going to be talking about TMNT Black, White, and Green, issue number 3, which drops July 31st. So I would imagine episode 1 of our podcast will probably drop the first week of August.
The first week of August.
Yeah, so make sure to check that out when it drops. Also subscribe if you're new.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll see you guys in a little bit with another video. Take care.
Take care. Bye.